You are hiking, somewhere beautiful, dense forest, mountain trail, the kind of place where you took exactly one photo for social media and then actually put your phone away because the real thing was better. You round a bend in the trail and there, maybe 30 meters ahead, standing in the middle of the path with the absolute confidence of something that has never once in its life needed to check if it was the most dangerous thing in the room, is a bear. Your brain does several things simultaneously. It assesses size. It checks for cubs. It tries to remember everything you've ever read about bear encounters, which turns out to be much less than you thought you'd retained. And somewhere in the back of your mind, behind the adrenaline and the advice about making yourself look big, a completely useless but irrepressible question surfaces. Which bear is this? Exactly. Because it matters. Not just for the immediate practical question of what you should do next, but because bears are not interchangeable. The 8 living species of bear are genuinely distinct animals, different ecologies, different temperaments, different evolutionary histories, different relationships with the humans, unfortunate enough to share their territory. They deserve to be understood individually, not lumped under a single terrifying umbrella. So here they are, all 8, ranked. And yes, ranked with criteria that will become clear as we go, covering a combination of ecological significance, biological interest, sheer impressiveness, and a quality that can only be described as the kind of animal that makes you feel something when you think about it. The ranking is subjective, the facts are not. Let's get into it. Starting at number 8, the giant panda, Ailuropoda melanoleuca. Before the panda fans in the audience start composing their responses, hear the argument out. The giant panda lands at the bottom of this ranking not because it's uninteresting, it's actually fascinating, just for reasons that include some fairly significant evolutionary embarrassments, but because it is, by almost any biological metric, a bear that is fighting against its own design at every moment of its existence. Giant pandas are bears. Taxonomically, unambiguously, they are members of family Ursidae. But they are carnivores, obligate members of the order Carnivora, who have elected at some point in their evolutionary history to eat almost exclusively bamboo. Bamboo, which has so little nutritional value per kilogram that pandas have to eat between 12 and 38 kilograms of it daily just to maintain basic metabolic function. Bamboo, which their digestive systems are not actually well designed to process because they retained the short carnivore gut rather than developing the long herbivore gut that would handle plant material efficiently. Bamboo, which they digest at roughly 17% efficiency, meaning 83% of what they eat passes through them essentially unused. The panda's response to this metabolic crisis is to lower its energy expenditure to extraordinary degrees. Giant pandas have metabolic rates roughly 37% lower than other placental mammals of comparable size. They move slowly. They rest extensively. They have a reduced thyroid function that suppresses metabolism further. They are, in effect, running their bodies in power-saving mode at all times to compensate for the fact that their diet is nutritionally catastrophic. They also reproduce at rates that would be considered underwhelming for any species and are actively alarming for an endangered one. Females are fertile for approximately 2 to 3 days per year. Raising cubs is energetically demanding and slow. The combination of habitat loss, dietary specialization, and reproductive limitations has made the giant panda a conservation cause célèbre for decades. Here's the interesting inversion. The panda's fame has actually done enormous good for conservation broadly. The money and attention that flowed into conservation programs because of panda charisma-funded work that protected entire ecosystems beyond the panda's specific habitat. The panda is bad at being a bear and extraordinarily good at being a symbol. That counts for something, just not enough to get it off the bottom of the ranking. Number 7. The spectacled bear, Tremarctos ornatus. The spectacled bear holds a title that sounds impressive until you realize it's also slightly lonely. The only bear species in South America. The entire continent, all of it, belongs to this one bear, and the spectacled bear has responded to this geographic exclusivity by being one of the least bear-like bears on the list. The name comes from the pale facial markings around the eyes that in some individuals suggest spectacles, though the pattern varies enough between individuals that some spectacled bears look more like they attempted glasses and gave up halfway through. Each bear's facial marking pattern is unique, which is a charming detail that does not come up often enough. These are the most arboreal of all bears, the most tree-climbing, tree-nesting, high-altitude frequenting bear species. They build platforms in trees to sleep on and to access food, which is behavior you simply don't associate with bears until you see a spectacled bear doing it and experience a brief but complete rearrangement of your assumptions. Their diet skews heavily toward plant material, bromeliads, cacti, fruit, palm hearts, with animal protein being a relatively minor component. They are shy, elusive, and poorly studied compared to most bear species, which makes them interesting in a different way than the well-documented ones. The spectacled bear is the last surviving member of the short-faced bear subfamily, the Tremarctinae, which once included some of the largest terrestrial mammalian predators ever to walk the Americas. The giant short-faced bear, Arctodus simos, was potentially the largest bear to ever exist, estimated at up to 1,000 kilograms, standing tall enough to look a modern horse in the eye. The spectacled bear is that lineage's sole survivor after a mass extinction event at the end of the Pleistocene removed its relatives from the planet. It's carrying an evolutionary legacy that extends back through some remarkable animals. That context makes it more interesting than its current shy forest bear reputation suggests. Number 6. The sun bear, Halarctos malayanus. The sun bear is the smallest bear species on Earth, topping out at around 60 to 80 kilograms. Lighter than many large dogs, lighter than most adult humans. It lives in the tropical forests of Southeast Asia, from northeastern India through southern China, down through the Malay Peninsula, and into Borneo and Sumatra. And it is, pound for pound, one of the most formidable animals in any forest it inhabits. Sun bears have the longest tongue relative to body size of any bear. A tongue that can extend 25 centimeters. Evolved for extracting honey from bee nests and insects from tree crevices. They have the longest claws relative to body size as well, curved and powerful, used for tearing into trees in pursuit of insects and honey. The chest patch that gives them their name, a pale, often orange or golden marking on the chest, varies in shape between individuals. Another example of bear-level individual variation in markings. What makes sun bears particularly noteworthy in this ranking is their facial expressiveness. Research comparing the social signals of sun bears to those of other bear species found that sun bears produce a wider range of facial expressions than any other bear, including expressions that closely mirror those used by other species in similar social contexts. The interpretation of this finding is that sun bears, despite living in tropical forest conditions with relatively limited visibility, evolved sophisticated facial communication. Possibly because their forest environment creates social situations where face-to-face communication is frequently relevant. They are also surprisingly aggressive in defense for their size. Sun bears do not adopt the low-conflict, avoid-confrontation strategy of some bear species. They will aggressively defend themselves against much larger animals, including tigers and leopards, and sun bear attacks on humans in their range are taken seriously because of the ferocity that can be generated by an animal that you might initially underestimate based purely on size. The sun bear is a reminder that the smallest animal in a category can still be extraordinarily dangerous. Number 5. The sloth bear, Molursus ursinus. The sloth bear is the most visually strange bear species, and the one that, upon first encounter in photograph or video, most commonly generates the reaction, "That cannot be a real animal." It looks assembled from spare parts. Long, shaggy black fur. Pale muzzle. Enormous curved ivory claws. Lips that can be extended into a tube. A gap in the front teeth that works as a vacuum nozzle. The sloth bear is what you get when evolution decides to build a bear specifically for consuming termites and other colonial insects, and does not worry about what the result will look like. The insect hunting adaptations are remarkable in their specificity. Sloth bears have highly mobile, protrusible lips. They can extend the lips outward into a tube, seal the nostrils voluntarily, and create a vacuum with the mouth that can be aimed at a termite mound hole. The resulting suction is powerful enough to extract termites rapidly from their chambers. This process is audible at considerable distance. The sloth bear feeding on a termite mound sounds apparently like a very loud sneeze repeated in rapid succession. Wildlife observers have reported hearing sloth bears feeding from over 100 meters away. They are also, against all reasonable expectation given the termite vacuum lifestyle, one of the more dangerous bears to encounter in their range. Sloth bears in India are responsible for a significant number of bear attacks on humans annually, and the attacks tend to be severe because the sloth bear, when startled, launches immediately into aggressive defense rather than retreating. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. The long claws that work so well on termite mounds work equivalently well in other applications. Encounters with sloth bears in tall grass or dense vegetation, where sudden close-range confrontations happen before either party has time to process the situation, are considered among the more dangerous wildlife encounters in South Asia. They are also devoted mothers. Sloth bear cubs ride on their mother's back, a behavior unique among bears and rare among large mammals generally, with the mother carrying up to 2 or 3 cubs simultaneously. The visual of a sloth bear mother moving through forest with cubs clinging to her back is one of those images that shifts the entire emotional register of how you experience the species. Number 4. The Asiatic black bear, Ursus thibetanus. The Asiatic black bear, also called the moon bear for the pale crescent marking on its chest, occupies a geographic range spanning from Iran through the Himalayas, across Eastern Asia to Japan. It is a forest bear with a diet heavily weighted toward plant material, insects, and small animals, supplemented seasonally by fruit and nuts during hyperphagia, the pre-hibernation eating period. What earns the Asiatic black bear its position in the upper half of this ranking is a combination of factors that individually are interesting and collectively make a strong case. First, the species has one of the most extensive and tragic histories of interaction with human exploitation of any bear species. Asiatic black bears are the primary species targeted by the bear bile farming industry, predominantly in China, Vietnam, and South Korea, in which bears are kept in small cages and subjected to repeated extraction of bile from the gallbladder for use in traditional medicine. The practice has been condemned by wildlife organizations and veterinary bodies globally, and the conditions in which bears are kept in this industry are documented as causing severe physical and psychological suffering. The Asiatic black bear's conservation status is vulnerable, and the bile farming industry is among the pressures contributing to wild population decline. Second, and on a less grim note, Asiatic black bears are among the more cognitively sophisticated bear species based on behavioral and captive research. They show problem-solving behaviors, strong individual personalities in captive settings, and emotional complexity that has impressed researchers working with them. The capacity for suffering that makes the bear bile situation so troubling is the same cognitive and emotional capacity that makes the species interesting from a behavioral science perspective. Third, the moon bears of Japan's forests have developed unique behavioral patterns adapted to the specific ecology of Japanese forests that differ meaningfully from mainland populations. An example of the geographic and ecological variation within a single species that rewards closer attention than the species typically receives. Number 3. The brown bear, Ursus arctos. The brown bear is the most widely distributed bear species on Earth, ranging across an enormous swath of the northern hemisphere from Western Europe through Russia, across into Alaska and Canada, with subspecies populating everything from the coastal rainforests of British Columbia to the high-altitude meadows of the Carpathian Mountains to the brown desert edges of Central Asia. It contains within it some of the most famous bear subspecies, including the grizzly bear of North America, and the Kodiak bear of Alaska's Kodiak archipelago, with Kodiak bears representing the largest brown bears on Earth and some of the largest terrestrial predators alive today. The brown bear earns third place because it is, in most respects, the platonic bear. It is what the word bear conjures: large, powerful, omnivorous, capable of behavior spanning from gentle fruit picking to explosive predatory violence, adapted to an enormous range of environments, present in human mythology and storytelling across essentially every culture that has ever shared habitat with it. The brown bear is the bear against which all other bears are implicitly measured. Its ecological flexibility is extraordinary. Brown bears on the Alaskan coast during salmon runs are essentially specialized piscivores, pulling fish from rivers with the practiced efficiency of animals that have done this particular thing across generations. The same species in the interior of Russia subsists largely on plant material, insects, and opportunistic scavenging. Brown bears in Yellowstone navigate a complex omnivore diet that shifts seasonally through whitebark pine nuts, elk calves, cutthroat trout, army cutworm moths, and ungulate carcasses. The range of dietary strategies within a single species is remarkable and reflects a cognitive and behavioral flexibility that matches the ecological breadth. Brown bear intelligence is well documented. They have large brains relative to body size for a carnivore. They use tools in the sense of using environmental features strategically. They have excellent spatial memory and demonstrate the kind of individual problem solving that complicates the assumption that large apex predators operate primarily on instinct. Brown bears in areas with human food sources learn to identify and access those sources with a creativity that wildlife managers find perpetually frustrating. They're not operating from a fixed behavioral script. They're assessing situations and generating responses. The grizzly bear's place in North American ecology, as a keystone species whose activity shapes plant communities, transfers marine nutrients from salmon runs into forest soils, and influences prey population dynamics, represents one of the more thoroughly documented cases of a large predator's systemic ecological role. Their decline from historical range across the continental United States and their partial recovery in certain protected areas is one of the major wildlife conservation stories of the 20th century. Brown bears are also the most likely answer to what bear was on that trail, which brings us full circle to the opening scenario. If you're in North America above a certain latitude, Europe, or Northern Asia, the bear that just made your afternoon significantly more interesting is almost certainly a brown bear. Act accordingly. Number 2, the American black bear, Ursus americanus. This ranking will surprise people who expected the American black bear to be background noise in the shadow of its larger, more famous brown bear cousin. It shouldn't. The American black bear is one of the most ecologically successful large mammals in the world, and its success story is more interesting than it's usually given credit for. The American black bear is the most numerous bear species on Earth, with an estimated population somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million individuals, more than all other bear species combined. It occupies a range covering most of forested North America and has, unlike virtually every other large predator on the continent, actually expanded its range in recent decades as forest regrowth in previously cleared areas created new habitat. While other large carnivores retreated before the advance of human settlement, the American black bear adapted. The adaptation is the interesting story. American black bears are extraordinarily plastic in their behavior. They adjust their ecology, their ranging behavior, their feeding patterns, and their timing of activity based on the specific human landscape they inhabit. Black bears in suburban and urban fringe areas have learned to navigate the human environment with a sophistication that regularly surprises the people living in those environments. They learn garbage collection schedules. They remember which properties have accessible food sources. They pass this information through behavioral observation to their cubs. The suburban black bear is not an animal accidentally displaced into human space. It's an animal that has assessed human space and found it workable. This adaptability extends to diet. Black bears are perhaps the most comprehensively omnivorous of all bear species, with diets documented to include hundreds of plant species, dozens of animal types, and essentially any human food product they can access. The generalist feeding strategy that makes them unpopular with beekeepers and camping outfitters is also the strategy that has kept them from the population collapses suffered by more specialized predators. They are also statistically considerably less dangerous to humans than their size and predator status would suggest. Fatal black bear attacks, while they do occur, are rare enough to be extensively analyzed individually in the literature. Black bears have a strong tendency toward conflict avoidance, bluff charging, retreating, vocalizing, rather than the more direct aggression of grizzlies or polar bears. Their default response to human encounter is typically retreat. This doesn't make them harmless, particularly where food conditioning has reduced their natural caution, but it puts their danger profile well below what bear-shaped anxiety would suggest. The American black bear's success in a human-dominated continent is a conservation story that doesn't get told often enough. While grizzly recovery required deliberate intervention and protected landscapes, black bears largely managed themselves through behavioral flexibility in conditions that eliminated most other large predators. That's worth recognizing. Number 1. The polar bear, Ursus maritimus. There was never really any other option for the top position, and the reasons are comprehensive enough that arguing against the ranking requires ignoring most of the available evidence. The polar bear is the largest land carnivore on Earth. Adult males average 400 to 600 kilograms, with exceptional individuals exceeding 700 kilograms. They are hypercarnivores. Unlike every other bear species, which are omnivores to varying degrees, polar bears subsist almost exclusively on animal protein and fat, primarily ringed seals and bearded seals accessed through the sea ice. The plant-eating, berry foraging, insect supplementing behavior that characterizes other bears is essentially absent in polar bear ecology. They are committed to the carnivore strategy in a way that makes the giant panda's bamboo commitment look almost reasonable by comparison. The physiological adaptations that make polar bear existence possible in the Arctic are extraordinary in their specificity and depth. The fur appears white but is actually transparent. Each hair shaft is a clear, hollow structure that scatters light in ways that produce the white appearance. The skin underneath is black, maximizing solar heat absorption. An insulating fat layer up to 11 centimeters thick provides thermal buffering against Arctic temperatures that regularly reach below 40 degrees Celsius. The paws are enormous, up to 30 centimeters across, with small papillae on the surface that provide traction on ice. Polar bears are strong swimmers, capable of sustaining swims of over 300 kilometers without rest in documented cases, though these are extreme events. Polar bears are classified as marine mammals by the United States government, a classification shared with seals, whales, and sea otters, because their dependence on the sea ice ecosystem is so fundamental. The polar bear's sensory capabilities are matched to the Arctic environment in ways that illuminate how thoroughly evolution can specialize an animal. They can smell seals through a meter of ice and snow. They can detect seal breathing holes, aglu, in Inuit, from a kilometer away and wait motionlessly beside them for hours in temperatures that would be fatal to unprotected humans waiting for the seal to surface. The combination of sensory acuity and patience required for this hunting strategy is considerable. They are also cognitively impressive in ways that their solitary, ice-focused lifestyle tends to obscure. Polar bears in captivity consistently demonstrate problem-solving capabilities and are considered among the more cognitively complex bear species. Their social interactions, while limited compared to more gregarious animals, are more nuanced than their reputation as solitary Arctic wanderers suggests. Play behavior between males has been extensively documented and appears to serve social bonding functions in an animal that would otherwise seem to have little use for social bonding. The conservation picture for polar bears is the sharpest edge of this entire discussion, because the threat they face is not primarily poaching or habitat destruction in the traditional sense. It is climate change, operating through the mechanism of sea ice loss. Polar bears require sea ice to access their prey. As Arctic sea ice extent and thickness decline with warming temperatures, polar bears lose the platform on which their entire hunting strategy depends. They are coming ashore earlier in the year as ice retreats and staying there longer, fasting through periods that are extending as the ice-free season lengthens. Females in declining condition produce fewer cubs and raise them less successfully. The polar bear's position at the top of this ranking carries a weight that the lower-ranked species don't quite have. Not because the polar bear is more deserving of concern than the sun bear or the Asiatic black bear, but because the mechanism threatening it is the most global, the most systemic, and the most irreversible of any threat facing any bear species. What happens to the polar bear in the next 50 years is a function of decisions being made right now by every industrialized society on Earth, whether those societies think about polar bears or not. The bear on the trail in the opening scenario is many possible things depending on where you are. It might be a brown bear doing its brown bear assessment of whether you're worth the energy. It might be a black bear already calculating the fastest route away from you. It might be, in vanishingly small probability, something from the middle of this list that got your geography completely wrong. But understanding which bear matters. Because these are not interchangeable animals. They are 8 distinct evolutionary solutions to the problem of being a large, warm-blooded mammal on a complicated planet. 8 different bets placed by natural selection on 8 different strategies, each shaped by millions of years of environmental pressure into something that is irreplaceable and, in most cases, currently under some form of threat. Know your bears. All 8 of them, starting with the one on the trail.